Hi everyone, I'm Kathryn Winup. I'm CFO for HTB and
I'm Natalie Harmony. I'm Program Manager for the Change Function at HTB.
we're obviously here today to celebrate International Women's Day.
Yeah.
And I think just, for our own reflections about what that means to us,
Yeah.
I think is quite important just because, I've been working for at least, well, maybe a few more years than you, but, it's always a kind of time just to pause and reflect slightly. I think just on what has changed, things that can be made different
Yeah.
again. And I think since still being relatively new to HTB, it's always interesting for whenever I join somewhere to hear other women's voices
Yeah.
and their experience, I suppose,
Yeah.
because in what I can do, hopefully, is try and help influence
Yeah.
just about how we want our business to
Yeah.
operate, etc. And then what else do we need to do? So,
Yeah.
from my experience, I always love hearing other people. So it'd be good, Natalie, just to hear yours and just, what is that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's joining HTB, I came for a specific project, which was supposed to be for a very short time here. And it was primarily working with very important people in the business, if I can say it that way. And it was going to be a change that was affecting the whole organization. So it did mean that I was a lot of the time working with every single person across the business because it touched upon, it was actually moving out to our new offices. So touched upon a lot of the things. So I guess my experience as a woman, something that around even taking a stand, what I really care about in my personal life and everything I get involved with is making sure that those voices that cannot be heard are always heard. And I feel like I feel a level of responsibility at times to ensure that if I'm in a place of influence, that I'm always speaking on behalf of others and trying to understand different, elements of the dynamics and whatever undertones are going on, and then trying to make sure that I'm drawing light to the right things and not just the things that everybody wants to focus on because it's most topical. I think sometimes we can get sort of swayed around that. So I think my experience has been very much being in a position of delivering change in HTB, which is, I love my job, I love what I do, but also ensuring that we're doing it for the right reasons and we're focusing on the right things. And for this was making sure that we had lots of natural light, if I also go to that level of detail, but also in a place that people want to come to work and want to be there and care about all the cultural elements of travel and also work-life balance and things like that, and just bringing those sort of insights into the way that we design things, and then sort of making sure that, with a key decision maker here, made sure that we were thinking about those things, even though we don't necessarily care about the detail of it.
And I think making a stand for me before I had children, and I've got three, two girls and a boy. So I think being able to engage and have an opinion on something is really important. Having confidence to speak up is very important. And I think to your point, when you're in a position that whether it's hierarchy or whatever, you kind of get there, being able to encourage others, especially females, I'm very passionate about that. And I think my two daughters are 20 and 16 now, so it's interesting to see how that younger generation it also speaks up, but in a different way to when I was in my 20s, probably. So that kind of, I think where you can give that support, and it's not just around females, although I think it's important because we all deal with things very differently. It is about encouraging people. And I think whether that is when you're in a meeting, asking somebody who's generally quiet to speak up. It's always interesting to hear different people's voices.
Absolutely.
And I think even after a meeting where you kind of maybe just drop a note to somebody to say, you did really well. I think that encouragement, especially depending on whether it's a first meeting, you're nervous, etc., that they are ways, pretty practical ways, that you can help around that. So for me, that's kind of those little things. And I think that for me, those small little elements always become a kind of ripple. And so therefore, talking about them helps. I think in other people seeing what you do, how you do it, can also just be that little bit more of encouragement to speak up around it. So, and I kind of think back to my career where people did that for me. and that builds,
Yeah.
I think, around it. So again, very small tweaks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just thinking then, the reason why I was so confident in doing my job is because I had a fantastic manager who just provided me the space to do what I needed to do, to give my recommendations. And there was a dialogue, and it was always an open dialogue. And I think that's why I'm always very keen to make sure that I'm that representation, because as you say, there's that ripple effect that happens.
Yeah.
And then I was just thinking about one of my colleagues. I don't want to call anyone out in case. thinking about one of my colleagues, and seeing the growth that she's had in her role and the confidence that she comes across. It's just it's so encouraging. And I think if that is the sentiment that we're all carrying through, absolutely, then hopefully we're building an organization that has people thinking about that sort of allyship in mind, of looking after people, encouraging people.
But I think that's very important. You know, when you think about any place that you work, you want to create that environment where it is fun to go to.
Yeah.
You know, it does have, and any business needs to have a set of policies or procedures in place to help guide it, I think, because you know, that is the kind of world that we live in. And there are key differences in life. You know, if you're a woman, you choose to have children, you know, going out of the workplace, taking that time out, and then coming back in, it is one of those big life changes that if the first time around when I did it, I was like, well, I have no idea what's going to happen. But you know, coming back in, having a policy in place which allows you to come back in, think about your career, that is such a key moment in your life, your partner's life, about how it changes the dynamic.
Yeah.
And that reflects, you know, your ambition, even what you want to do at that point, what you want to do with your career, and all of the logistics of managing all of that. So I think allyship, when we talk about that in the bank context, is about making sure we have the right policies and procedures in place. And I always think that's a continual kind of communication loop where you're getting feedback from others. I mean, one of the examples in a previous place where I worked, and it was a member of my team actually, and she was going off on maternity, and she just raised to me, did you know our policy, we only get, I think it was something like 8 weeks off paid versus the market. And so I said, well, that is very interesting that you say that, and I didn't realise it. I was long after I was having any more children. But I said, write me a paper and we'll take it to the exec.
Yeah.
And she did that, and then they changed it.
Yeah.
So that one person changed it for everybody.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Which is incredible.
But it was about her talking about it. And just said, did you realise?
Yeah.
So, and I think you'll never quite know everything about every single policy.
Yeah.
But people who are about to experience something, by looking at it, can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking, we after International Women's Day last year, there was sort of a lot of feedback we got across the all the people, the female and at HTB, and that spurred on this desire for us to create what we call the Change Network. And I think that is exactly what that is there for, is to hear the voices, not just for is male and female. It's
it's very
not restricted. Actually hear the voices and make sure we're drawing attention to the key points and then raising those things, just like you mentioned, like, you know, with that lady bringing that to you. Because if you're not thinking about those things in those moments, it's not something that you're actually focused on. And we need to hear, I don't know what's going on in risk and compliance. What's going on in risk and compliance? Tell me, so we can have that conversation. I think that's what I love about the Change Network, is that opportunity for us within the business to take some ownership about ensuring that any policies we're bringing in, anything, any events that we're doing, any sort of causes that we're focusing on, has the business in mind and has that growth. And I think it was so beautiful to see the growth of that from International Women's Day, and seeing that carry that through. And now we're going to be launching, which is so excited for more people to join us, which is really great. But it's so important that we have that. And as you say, allyship is not just the intent. It's not, I really want to be an ally. It's the action behind it. And I think that's what I love about the Change Network.
Yeah, and I think that's everybody can play their part in that, right? So whether that is in your team, in a meeting, whatever you do, that's how you kind of engage. Networking is very important. I have found tremendous value from, you know, a really great group of women that I've kind of grown up with, kind of career-wise, and I'm actually going out for dinner with 3 of them tomorrow night, because their experiences are slightly different to yours, but they might have experienced something that you're about to go through. And playing it back, playing it through, they can give you great insight or ideas, hints, tricks to say, well, actually think about how you might want to play this.
Yeah.
And sharing that, I think is incredibly powerful, but it also is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Because certain things you think about, you might stress over. Well, how am I going to play this? What am I going to do? How am I going to say this? Elements to it. So that network of support, I think, is uber critical.
Yeah.
And I think you want to have that kind of mentorship as you kind of go through, and it's not just from more senior people; it's from your other peers and your friends.
Yeah.
Because I think that's incredibly helpful about how you take yourself forward.
Yeah.
And it's in both career and your personal life, right? It's nothing
Definitely.
better than going out with a bunch of girlfriends and a chat about life. So I've always found that incredibly helpful for me personally.
Yeah. And we were talking about mentorship and how because there's a lot of focus around that for this theme of this year, and we were thinking about how do we do this, and we're actually pulling together a speed mentoring event next week, which will sort of just go through that sort of an opportunity for people across the business who can be mentors, and then focusing on women because it is International Women's Day. And then sort of the mentees will be the women, and they'll be sort of having conversations with different people across the business to give them sort of advice. And I think it's mentorship, I think sometimes can be like, it's not about giving advice. It's about actually partnering with people and bringing them along the journey of like, how can we do this? And sometimes I end up in situations, actually do some mentorship in my personal life where my mentees are mentoring me and I'm learning from them. And there's this dialogue of consistency of learning, and I think that's really, really, really valuable.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes back to the continual communication loop.
Yeah,
I think there are many different paths where you can seek insight.
Yeah.
Through, but I think the coaching, mentoring one, it's always about trust.
Yeah.
And so being able to have quite an open conversation, or feeling comfortable that you feel that you can talk about areas that you feel you might feel weaker on, or you don't want to say it openly, to kind of think, oh, does it show me in a certain light? I think that is a real kind of area where you can, in a really good mentoring coaching relationship, explore that, because it's all about building confidence around it. So, and as you said, HTB introducing it, I think it's a great step forward.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So obviously the theme is accelerating action for International Women's Day this year. So how have you done that in your personal life?
Yeah, personal life and professional. I before COVID, obviously made it a lot more acceptable about flexi working.
Yes.
I remember having my second child, my daughter Ella, and back with a brand new baby, and for a year probably worked the most silliest hours going. And I just remember that probably towards about 9 months, 10 months in, I just went to my boss and I said, look, one day a week from now on, I'm going to be working from home. I need to get a bit better balance back in my life. And it was still unusual to do that.
Yeah.
To his credit, he said, absolutely, there was no issue, which probably made me think back, oh, I should have asked this a lot earlier. But it was critical for me to balance that in my personal life while still doing a really good job in a very busy role, and to get a little bit more balance back. COVID for me has accelerated that, probably decades in how people use technology now. And I think to the benefit of everybody. So, and I've kind of always said this, that pre-COVID, my son, he's now going to be 11 this year, if I took him to school and dropped him off, it's predominantly mums dropping off their kids. Post-COVID, 50% dads. And seeing that actually for my son is very important from a societal context of when he decides, if he decides to have children, about how he might operate. And I think that's very important around there. But also other things, I think, just around taking a stand, speaking up for yourself, very important. Thinking about how you impact, the room, the dynamic, I think is something don't underestimate.
Absolutely.
Around that. And I think the other thing kind of coming back is that role modelling. So as I said, my two daughters, I'm very keen for them to be able to speak up and to challenge and to feel confident around that. And that's very important, I think, in what I feel I can demonstrate.
Yeah,
And what about yourself?
Well, I was just thinking, it's for me, my journey to, I guess, finance now has been paved with lots of different industry experience.
Mm.
I actually started in marketing,
Oh.
believe it or not. I studied a music degree, so
Very different.
very different, very different to where I am now. I think because of that, a lot of the time there's a lot of like imposter syndrome, which was really like, so I always felt this place. I kind of felt like, okay, maybe I'm not the right candidate for the role, or maybe like I have to work a lot harder. So I probably am currently in that stage of like working very long hours, because I'm able to do so at the moment. But I think what I started to realize was over time there was a level of respect that I built as for doing a good job, and I stopped almost devaluing my voice.
Hmm.
And I would always, in the situations where someone would be like, oh, yeah, I wish this could happen. And I would think, I'm like, yeah, I wish that could happen too. And I'm like, wait, I can do something about it. And I think an example of that was, um, without, I guess, giving too much information away, it was just taking a stand against, people talking over other people in meetings.
Yeah.
And you
Big
can
one.
see someone sort of just sink into themselves. They wanted to say something and they couldn't say anything. And if I was chairing a meeting, I felt I had confidence to do that. But then
Mhm.
sometimes I was like, actually, no, I have confidence to do it regardless of that. And it's always bringing a lightness to it. Because I think sometimes when we think about equality, diversity, inclusion, sometimes we're thinking about it, oh, everything has to be down because we're not doing a very good job and everything needs, but sometimes it doesn't have to be as serious as we make it out to be.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's just encouraging somebody else. It may not be that person who spoke over them, whether it's a male or a female, meant to do that. They probably were just so guns blazing of what idea they wanted to send across that they didn't realize that. And it's bringing light into it, but then also being very confident in providing correction
Yeah.
and understanding the why behind things. I think when I was definitely growing in my career, I didn't have the confidence to do that.
Yeah.
And I would be like, I can't say anything. And someone would be like, but you can say something.
Yeah.
You're in the room, you can say something. And I think it was consistently then choosing to be confident and choosing that even though I'm terrified right now, and I feel like maybe someone's going to tell me off afterwards, but choosing that actually, no, I'm doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And if I make a mistake, I can apologize.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm not making a mistake, then at least someone will be helped as a result of me taking a stand. I think that's kind of been my journey through it, because I think over time I become an expert. I become an expert in what I do. So I shouldn't have to doubt myself,
Yeah.
and I shouldn't allow that to be the separation of me actually doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that confidence of speaking up, it does come with a bit of age and maturity and experience.
Yeah.
But it is, I think the other kind of key thing around there is presenting. Generally these, people generally shirk away
Mm.
from that because they don't feel comfortable. I think that's a real key skill that
Mm.
we can do. And I remember the first time I did that, and I just thought, oh God, that's awful. But putting yourself out there and doing that and overcoming some of those
Yeah.
fears, you can really do that with a bit of encouragement from people and practice.
Yeah.
Around that makes it feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think taking a stand is in a lot of ways things that you can do for other people. So when you're in the workplace, if you hear something inappropriate, you know, speak up, mention it, because I think that
Absolutely.
only changes behaviours.
Yeah.
And then there's taking a stand for yourself, which is about your own development.
Yeah.
And I think everybody should think about that in the context of when we have our development conversations,
Mm.
because that is where the bank can support you.
Yeah.
If there's certain areas that you want to develop, speak up about them,
Absolutely.
because that's the only way
Yeah.
that somebody can then help you
Yeah.
if you voiced it.
Yeah.
So I really do think that is important,
Yeah.
and that's within everybody's reach
Exactly.
to do it.
Exactly. And I think there's a responsibility almost as line managers or
Yeah.
leaders to make sure we are encouraging those conversations. I think it's almost maybe something that we can think about doing is bringing that as part of our goals,
Yes.
to make sure that we're speaking to our team and adding that layer of making sure that is always, there's that conversation, because I think everyone's so busy.
Yeah,
Everything,
they
there's
are, and I
always
hear that a
something
lot.
to do,
But
but there's time.
Yeah.
You can make time for this.
And it is a two-way thing,
Yeah.
right? It is about owning your own goal,
Mm-hmm.
shall we say, and about where you want to go.
Yeah.
And as I said, depending on where you are in your own life cycle, that can change.
Yeah.
So, and it's about having a conversation
Yeah.
about it. So, a bit like we've done today.
Exactly.